After defeating the androids and dealing with Cell, Gohan, Videl, Trunks, and the newly reprogrammed Android 16 would enjoy a relative peace for about 6 years. About 2 years into this era of peace, Gohan and Videl have Pan. It was a difficult adjustment for Gohan. He was constantly on edge, waiting for something to go wrong, waiting for the next threat. He couldn't relax. Everyone would keep training, but Gohan and Trunks weren't able to reach Super Saiyan 2. Despite their best efforts, they just couldn't hack it. Maybe that was why Gohan couldn't relax. If he could just surpass his past self, maybe then he'd be comfortable. But maybe that was only part of his issues. Bulma had given them a capsule house, and they would move to the land of Korin, as it was the only place they could grow senzu beans. One day, while training with Pan outside, Gohan would receive a rather strange visitor. A short, purple-skinned humanoid with a white mohawk and pointy ears. There was someone else with him, a taller man with red skin, pointy ears, and long white hair. Both were dressed rather strangely. Gohan was sure he'd never seen robes like that before. Since Gohan was distracted by the newcomers, Pan was able to score a hit, headbutting him in the sternum and knocking him to the ground. "Are you quite sure you can help us? What kind of warrior is bested by a child?" Shin would roll his eyes. Even Kibito had to know that wasn't a serious fight. "Be serious, Kibito. Though, the child is remarkably strong. Perhaps I should have expected that from the mightiest warrior on this planet." Gohan wasn't sure who these guys were, though they seemed to know him. He also wasn't sure about the title of strongest on the planet, but it was definitely between him and Trunks. He'd send Pan inside before landing in front of the pair, asking who they were and what they were doing here. The short one introduced himself as the Supreme Kai, and the tall one was his attendant. They needed his help to stop a wizard named Babidi from resurrecting a creature known as Majin Buu, which was hidden on Earth. They didn't know where the wizard was, only that they were sure he'd make a move in the near future. They would offer him the chance to come back to their home planet to train and prepare for the threat. Gohan accepted, of course, but suggested that they bring Trunks and Videl with them as well. Pan wanted to come too, but they'd compromise. She could train with them, but she was not to fight Majin Buu. They'd stop at Capsule Corp to pick up Trunks, informing Bulma and 16 of the situation. 16 decided to stay behind in case Babidi was to appear on Earth. Shin would instruct Kibito to do the same and to come get them if they were needed. Since he was staying behind, Videl would give Kibito a bag of senzu beans in case he needed them. Gohan, Videl, Trunks, and Pan would go with Shin to the Supreme Kai's planet to train. Their first test was to spar with Shin himself, who quickly found himself outmatched by Gohan and Trunks as Super Saiyans. He was stronger than Videl and Pan at least, but even they were quite powerful. Gohan and Trunks would take turns trying to remove the Z-Sword. Neither could do it in their base forms, but Trunks managed as a Super Saiyan. Probably for the best, since he was the only one who knew how to fight with a sword anyways. They'd train with it for a while, and once Trunks was used to using it, then Shin would suggest testing its edge on Kachin, which breaks it like in the original. They released the Elder Kai, who's a lot more interested in Videl than Gohan or Trunks, but when they explained the situation, he'd offer to unlock Gohan's potential. Gohan wasn't sure. He had a lot of potential as a kid, but he didn't know if he still did. "Why me?" "Because I can tell you've got well springs of untapped power. It's buried deep inside, but it's there. You just need someone who can bring it out again." "Well, I did when I was young, but I haven't been able to access it since I was a kid." "Bah, to a Kai, that's barely even a few minutes ago. I can get your energy flowing again." He just had to sit still for 24 hours. That was great. 24 hours minimum according to Elder Kai. Apparently it could be longer since his energy was so stagnant. Before the ritual could get underway, Kibito would appear on the planet, explaining how Babidi was on Earth and they needed to get back as soon as possible. The group would go to leave, but Elder Kai would scold Gohan. "You have to leave it to those two. If Buu is unleashed, then you can't win without this power." He tried to argue, but Trunks and Videl would insist that they could at least stall long enough for him to get there if it came to it. He didn't like it, but eventually he agreed. Pan was supposed to stay behind, but at the last second, just as Kibito was about to teleport, she'd grab a hold of Trunks, so she went with them. Gohan thought about going after them, but he was confident Videl could keep her out of trouble. Obviously, she wasn't allowed to fight, she was only 4, and when Videl realized Pan had tagged along, she'd ask Kibito to bring her to Chi-Chi's home. He somewhat reluctantly agreed, giving them back the bag of senzu beans and heading off. They didn't have much time. Remember, in the future Trunks timeline, Babidi had spent 10 years before making a move collecting energy for Buu's resurrection. He had almost all the energy he needed already. They'd meet up with 16 outside of Babidi's ship. Babidi and Dabura knew they'd been seen, but they'd head inside. Babidi didn't want to risk having Dabura fight all those people. Dabura might have won, but then one of them could have attacked him while Dabura was busy. Kibito would arrive not long afterwards, reluctantly deciding to follow them inside. It was their only option. They couldn't fight them any other way. They'd head inside the ship, and first of all they were faced with Pui Pui. Before they started to fight, Kibito would speak up. "Babidi will use the damage energy created by our fighting to fuel Majin Buu, so we need to make this quick." 16 would volunteer to fight Pui Pui, reasoning that maybe it wouldn't work on him since he was mechanical. Babidi would still absorb energy from Pui Pui as they fought, but better than him absorbing energy from both fighters. It isn't much of a fight, however, as even after increasing the gravity to give Pui Pui an advantage, Pui Pui didn't stand a chance. He'd punch 16 in the stomach, but it didn't do anything. And then one blow from 16 would leave him sprawled out on the floor, and he was swiftly destroyed by a blast of energy. Yakon was a bit more competition. They'd learned quickly that they couldn't use ki attacks because he'd absorbed the energy. This meant they could only use physical attacks, and while 16 still held the advantage, he couldn't seem to inflict enough damage to finish him. And the longer this fight lasted, the more energy Babidi would absorb. Back on Supreme Kai's planet, Gohan would attempt to relax as Elder Kai performed the ritual, but as he did, he felt a sharp pain in his arm, which began to spread throughout his body. It felt as if every muscle in his body was cramping up at once. Is it supposed to hurt?
It wouldn't hurt if you just relax. Your energy is all twisted up, inside out, and wrong. It's as if your body is hardwired for a fight all the time. When was the last time you let yourself relax?
Gohan wasn't sure he could remember the last time he truly felt relaxed. Not since I was a kid. I was fighting the androids for so long, I guess I've struggled to adjust to a world where I don't need to. He was useless against them. 17 and 18 beat him more times than he could count. Super 13 given him a thrashing, and he still wouldn't be able to beat Cell after all these years.
Those battles are over. You need to let them go. How are you supposed to face new enemies if you're still grappling with your old ones?
He could only promise to try, but every time he tried to relax, he'd see 17 or 18, 13, or the sneering face of Perfect Cell. Elder Kai could tell he was troubled by his face.
Those people are gone. They cannot cause any more harm. You don't need to worry about them anymore.
Gohan would relax somewhat, not completely, but the old man was right. Many of them were in the past, and the androids of his time were dealt with. He had nothing to worry about. He knew that, but even so. No, he has to try and move on. He was needed in the here and now. There was no telling how strong this Majin Buu might be. If he didn't get his head in the game, he could be dooming the world to a far worse fate than the androids or Cell. Back at the fight with Yakon, Videl had decided to try something, the lullaby punch, and it had worked. She'd sent the monster to sleep, and now since he wasn't awake to consume the energy from their attacks, Trunks would power up to Super Saiyan and destroy the monster with a burning attack. Next up is Dabura, and he is the real problem. Even 4-on-1 they weren't strong enough to win. Dabura would block a punch from 16, as well as Kibito, before grabbing the both of them and slamming their heads together. Trunks would try to hit him in the back, but he'd easily avoid it before kicking him to the ground. He'd turn to see Videl preparing the Thundershock surprise, and he'd knock her out of the sky with a stream of fire from his mouth.
And where is the Supreme Kai? Or is he too cowardly to fight this battle himself? I will not allow someone as lowly as you to speak ill of the Supreme Kai.
Kibito would fire an energy blast towards Dabura at full strength, but Dabura just took it with little more than a scratch. By now, Babidi had enough energy, and was in the process of reviving Majin Buu. He just needed to keep these guys busy. He was sure Master Babidi would want to test Buu against someone, but he didn't need all of these people for that. So he'd rush forward before killing Kibito with a blast of energy. Before she could react, he'd grab Videl by the throat, preparing another blast. This time, however, Trunks would fly forward, kicking him in the back of the head, causing him to drop Videl and knocking Dabura to the ground.
I won't let anyone destroy the peace we've worked so hard to achieve.
Seeing Kibito die and Dabura go to kill Videl had been the push Trunks needed. He'd scream before powering up to Super Saiyan 2. Dabura would smirk as he got to his feet.
Well, it would seem you are worth fighting.
Dabura would take this fight seriously, giving it his all, clashing with Trunks. They seemed pretty even, though perhaps Trunks was winning. But even so, Videl wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. Even if Trunks could win, they needed to save his energy for the fight with Buu. Videl would take out a small bottle with a seal on it, placing it on the ground. Trunks knocked Dabura out of the sky with an overhead strike. He'd then charge after him, preparing a follow-up attack, but Dabura wanted him to approach, preparing his spit to turn him into stone. He just needed to wait for Trunks to get close enough. Before he could, however, he heard the girl from earlier shout something. Evil containment! Dabura was suddenly enveloped in a wave of energy, swirling around, unable to escape, and suddenly was directed towards a small bottle. He could do nothing but scream as he was sealed away. As the technique was finished, Videl would place the lid on the ball before collapsing to her knees. Using that move against someone like that had taken a lot out of her. She could feel herself getting lightheaded. She'd snap back to reality, however, as Android 16 fed her a sensu beam, revitalizing her in an instant. He'd tossed another sensu beam to Trunks, meaning they now had 3 left. Babidi was shocked. They'd beaten Dabura. That meant he had minutes at most before they reached him, and if that woman could just seal people away like that, what was to stop her from doing it to Buu? Speaking of Buu, he'd emerged from the sealed ball, stumbling out and landing flat on his face before stretching and yawning. Babidi supposed that was fair enough, he'd been asleep for a long time.
Hello there, Boo. Did you have a good rest?
Boo hungry! Was all Boo had to offer in response. It had been millions of years since he'd last ate, after all.
Well, we can get some food afterwards. We have intruders on my ship, and I need you to get rid of them.
Boo would scratch his head before just blowing a hole through the roof of the ship and flying outside, prompting Babidi to chase after him.
Hey, I'm talking here, and Boo not listening!
Boo didn't seem willing to obey, until Babidi threatened to seal him away again. By now, Trunks, Videl, and 16 had showed up, following them out the ship. Guessing that that pink blob thing was Majin Buu. It didn't look like a destroyer of worlds, but you couldn't judge by appearances. Trunks and Videl had never felt anything like this. They just had to hope that whatever Elder Kai wanted to unlock within Gohan would be strong enough to defeat Buu, because even as a Super Saiyan 2, Trunks could tell he wouldn't win. That's where we're going to stop for now. Is the future doomed, or will they be able to keep Buu busy until Gohan is ready? No Dragon Balls means Kibito is gone for good, so if they run out of senzu beans they can't count on his healing powers. Dabura is sealed away, but how long will that last? Comment down below and let me know what you think of this story so far. Are you enjoying it? Feel free to leave any suggestions for future what ifs, or just say hi. Maybe consider liking the video or even subscribing, but that is totally up to you. Thanks for watching and take care.